So Chris, let's take it back a little bit here. You started out studying psychology at the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, but then went on to get your MBA. So what made you decide to change subjects?
So, and actually, Chris, it was while I was at UW Stevens Point where the transition happened. Initially going into psychology, I thought, hey, maybe I'd like to be a psychologist. And, the thought of two things. One, going on for 4 years to get a PhD right away. And that was minor. The other was, doing therapy and listening to other people's problems, all day, or that prospect became a little bit less attractive the more I got to really know about it. And so I really can't tell you where the thought about, let's maybe combine psychology and business came from, but somewhere in there it happened. So I actually have a minor in business in undergrad. And then, believe it or not, connected to what I've been doing for the past 20 years. The guy who created Topgrading and had been doing it for a long time and had written several books on it up to that point, Brad Smart, was a family friend. And I read his book in college and thought, all right, this is really interesting. I didn't even really know that kind of thing existed, figuring out who was the right person to put in an open position. Read the book and then, thought maybe I'll do this a little bit later. Believe it or not, sold cell phones for about a year and then decided to get an MBA and kind of start an actual career.
Nice. So I was you kind of already answered my question. On LinkedIn, it shows you went from boom, you got your MBA, and then next thing you know, you're the VP at Topgrading. So what happened in that year, and how did you, go straight to VP?
Yeah,
and now president.
Right. And so the reason of going straight to VP was because at that point, Topgrading was a pretty small company. It was largely, me and Brad. We had a great assistant and then some other people that we pass work off to. So it was, frankly, in the early days, especially, a little bit to hide my youth, or to at least initially hide my youth. People will know about how old I was when eventually talked with them and met with them. But we figured it would help build a little credibility by being the vice president. And yeah, several years ago, as Brad was and still is kind of working to retire, I've taken over a lot of the day-to-day running the company.
I wasn't planning on going here, but I think you led me right to this next question. So many businesses are now doing the Gino Wickman traction thing, and Gino has the accountability chart, and they really de-emphasize titles. But just as you said, titles carry weight. I'm not gonna, if I put someone in sales, I'm not gonna say the sales rep. I might say director of strategy or something. What's your thoughts on that, the accountability and just the title itself and that credibility?
And so, Chris, I'm somewhere in between, titles being extremely important and they're not being important at all. I think it really lies in somewhere in the middle, because I've certainly seen inflated titles. When you mentioned a sales rep, and someone maybe titled sales executive, and you get them on the phone and you realize they've just been doing inside sales for a few months, and so then it just loses a little bit of credibility. As long though as there is, expertise and experience and knowledge and such behind that title, those two things have to at least somewhat match, somewhere in between. So that's thought on titles, right? Not extremely important, but there, you need to give them a little bit of thought. And, I know we'll probably at least at some point talk a bit about recruiting. And for me, that's where the titles really are important. So you're attracting the right type of people and not the wrong type of people. So being thoughtful on those titles that you put on job postings, definitely, we talk to and work with our clients on that, thinking about what should that title be to attract the right level person.
And I'm glad you just jumped right in there for the, with 20 years of experience and working with many businesses and evaluating their hiring processes and the success of a business. Let's jump right in and just focus on recruiting. So how much importance should a business place on the recruiting methods in terms of its overall business strategy?
If the leadership team or the leader of the business really believes that people are their most important resource, or some phrasing of that idea, and I really do believe many, if not most, leaders do believe that, it is extremely important to focus time on getting your hiring process right, as much time as you spend getting any other process in the business right. And I'll say on the flip side of that, as we are engaging with clients and with new companies and new firms, we see the opposite very often, where excuse me, hiring is a lot more of an afterthought than focused on as a strategic business process. And really for us, our overall goal at Topgrading is to help our clients get the right people in the right jobs consistently, and part of that is getting hiring to be really focused on as a strategic business process, because it should be.
I completely agree. And what comes to mind to me is, I'm a big NCAA college basketball fan, and like every year their top players, their A+ players go to the NBA. It's like, imagine if you're a business owner and your top players left you every single year and you didn't have that set up. So let's talk about the cost of hiring the wrong person. So what's the potential cost of hiring the wrong person?
In a word, astronomical. Astronomical, and frankly, it really is astronomical, whether you're thinking about the cost of hiring or mishiring an entry-level person or an executive. Now, the numbers are much bigger, when you get to the executive level, but it's also expensive when we're talking about your entry-level folks. Often your entry-level employees have the most contact with your clients or customers in the entire company, and so they're the face of the company or the firm to your customers and clients. And so we need to really focus on that as well. What we found, we've done research on this from kind of top to bottom in an organization, and in terms of making a hiring mistake at the lower level, we found that even let's say cashiers in a grocery store, it costs about 1 time their annual compensation, so 1x their annual compensation when you get that wrong. And then moving up to the executive level, we found that can, on average, it's about 24 times that person's base salary when you get the hiring decision wrong.
That's just that's very extreme. I didn't think it would have that big of an impact, even from the bottom level. I see it from the executives when they have a lot of direct reports and a lot of that thought leadership passes down. Let's talk about the tough situation. The business owners hired someone, they've kind of let these individuals kind of coast, right? And they've got these, I guess, C or D, whatever players. What's your approach? Do you go through the PIP, the performance improvement plan, or is it just, hey, they're the wrong fit, see you later, let them free?
Sure. And I'll say it depends, and I'll tell you what it depends on, at least from our perspective. I'll say though, in terms of just overall, when you do fire someone or help them move on to the next phase of their career, it's really important that it's fair. And so one thing that we do very unfairly when we hire someone new or move someone into a new position is, we do let them coast. And often we let them coast without really articulating what the expectations are. So they don't really know. We're not talking about those expectations. We're not coaching them and giving them the support they might need to meet or exceed our expectations. And then, what happens, you finally get frustrated enough, and we bring a banker's box in on Friday afternoon. And, that's completely unfair, especially from our perspective. So, what you ideally do is you do lay out those expectations. And, we help our clients, and our clients do create things called job scorecards, where the performance that someone needs to deliver to be considered a high performer is clearly spelled out with very clear metrics. So it's very clear whether or not that person met or did not meet the performance expectations in that area. And as importantly, we rate or we list the core values. And some firms have them, some firms don't. But if you do, what are the core values? What does everyone need to exhibit to really be a good culture fit? And then there are, of course, a bunch of other behavioral competencies where someone needs to be excellent or at least okay and to be effective in that role. So we put all of those things on the job scorecard and share that with that person. Say, hey, here are expectations. Ideally, we do that the first day they're in that job so they know from the start. But if not, you create the job scorecard and say, hey, I should have done this a long time ago. Here are the expectations. Let's talk them through. Let's talk through where you might be meeting, where you might be falling short. And that kind of acts as the basis of your PIP or your performance improvement plan. And then you talk about that consistently. After some time, one of a couple things is going to happen. One, they're going to be making progress. Two, they might say, well, like, hey, thanks a lot. I wish you'd have done this a couple of years ago when I started, but I guess better late than never. And they actually rise to the occasion. And then there are other times where you do certainly have the wrong person in the wrong job and you need to do something about it. So, if you have time, and it also depends on why they're the wrong person, if they maybe don't have the skill to do it, teach them, try. And if they just can't get there, give them a chance and give them some coaching. And then, think about giving them a fair severance when they do leave, because really, it's your fault, whoever you are. It's your fault for making that hiring decision in the first place and offering them the job. So you don't need to be fair that way. Guys, I'll say in the other direction, if you have somebody doing something egregious, make a decision. That's kind of an obvious one if somebody's doing something egregious. And if you have someone who is just not a good culture fit, maybe even toxic to the culture, you want to move on that person sooner rather than later, because they're really doing damage and actually increasing the potential that you'll lose other A players on the team.
I think everything you just said there is gold, and I'll probably have to listen to that several times because there's just so many nuggets there. One of the things I love that you mentioned is the scorecard. It's no longer Chris, the mean guy that's that doesn't like me. It's here's the objective data that says you're not performing at the level that we need.
Yes.
I think those decisions are easier.
Absolutely. It makes, and managing people, it might be easy for some, but it's not easy for a lot of people. The job scorecard, though, does make managing others, and especially managing performance and behaviors, easier than it is without. Absolutely.
So let's switch over to the A players. Okay. In the broadest sense, tossing the softball up for this question, what is your definition of an A player?
So two components. One is they're a high performer. So they deliver the results you expect a high performer to deliver. And the other part of the definition is that they fit your culture. So simply a high performer who fits the culture. A little bit more technical, but believe it or not, amorphous definition is someone who is in the top 10% of talent available for the pay. So for us, that actually for the pay piece, and if you want to put high performer for the pay, it's really important because we're not saying you have to pay, at the top of the pay range for whatever that job is kind of in the world or in the country. What we're saying is, figure out what you can afford, connect it with your business goals, and then get someone who is in the top 10% of talent available, willing to do the job for that work or for that amount of compensation.
I love that. And then, so, one of the things I've heard, and I kind of wanted to just get your feedback on this because I'm a little bit contrarian, go against the common quotes that you've heard, but I kind of want to get your feedback on this. It's like, you've heard that all A players always work for someone else. Oh, you don't need to, when you're hiring, you don't go to Indeed, don't go to, ZipRecruiter. The best players are already working for someone else. Is that true? Is there some level of truth to that?
Chris, there's certainly some level of truth to that. I'm not going to say it's an absolute, but now with COVID and a lot of cutbacks in some industries like hospitality, having to we say cut to the bone and cut maybe far into the bone, meaning they've laid off a lot of A players. So in kind of normal times, about 25% of the people who are in your talent pool. So, available to do the job for that amount of pay. Not saying they're going to be a great fit, but they're just willing to do the job that you have for them. About 25% are out looking for a new job at any given time. And the other part of that, though, is somewhere between 60 and 80% of the people in that talent pool are willing to talk and listen about a new opportunity. And, so again, it's not an absolute, but for us as we're, screening candidates and interviewing candidates and looking at their backgrounds, being currently employed is certainly a green flag, in terms of whether or not someone might be an A player in their current role or not. And so I'm not sure if you were going here, but I will. And that is, you need a way to get connected with those passive candidates. And, what we've actually seen recently is there are in a lot of areas, there's a higher volume of people applying to job ads, whether it's Indeed or ZipRecruiter or companies' career pages, especially the job boards though. But in that increased number of applicants, there's a smaller percentage of people who are even qualified. So a lot of layoffs have happened. There's a lot of people on the market, but a lot of those people are sending the resumes or applying automatically based on some keywords in the job ads. And so you really need, it's especially important now to have a way to connect with those passive candidates, because A players as well, and this is a bit of my educated guess on this. I don't have any direct research, but I'm guessing that people, A players who are currently employed and whose firm or company seems somewhat stable might not be looking as much as they would have been maybe last January. So, they're like, hey, I've got something that's at least decent going on. The future looks pretty stable. I'm going to stay here, even if they don't like their job, or, they're being maybe worked a lot harder than they would like to, 80 or 90 or 100 hours a week versus the 60 that they prefer to be working. They might be sitting tight, and I think they are sitting tight right now versus out there looking and hoping that you have a newer, a better opportunity for them.
Yeah, and I would completely agree with that, especially with the kind of the uncertainty for many industries right now. Even legal, most of our audience being personal injury attorneys, when there's a lot less cars on the road, so there's a lot less auto accidents, and that just impacts everyone in regards to that niche and that industry. And so kind of staying on the A player side of things, let's say you have I'm kind of going to throw like a hypothetical situation at you here. Let's say you have like a mid-management, so maybe even a little bit more responsibility, and you're going through this process of trying to recruit an A player, and you're just struggling to find one. What's the for that level of importance? Is it just hold out until you get the A player? Is it try to groom the B player to the A player? What's kind of your advice on some of these roles that require a lot more responsibility for the organization?
And so, Chris, it also, I apologize because a lot of my answers start with it depends, but it depends, and there are some some certain scenarios there where we can get a little bit better answers. And so it depends on the stage of the firm. I was talking to a startup this morning. They have 2 employees, and they are looking to hire 2 of potentially the most important people in the company for the next several years. So those 2 people, those 2 new hires, cannot be developmental candidates. They need to walk in the door being, 97% competent and able to do the job. There might be a little bit that they have to learn, but in terms of the core of the job, they have to be able to do it extremely well the day they walk in the door. So that's one situation. Another situation, I was actually talking to that same client about another company, and this company has been on the best places to work lists, like national lists, for over 20 years. They have a wonderful developmental culture, and they were looking to hire a new regional vice president, and this new regional vice president was going to have one of the long-term regional vice presidents as a mentor, like a day or 2 a week. And so in that instance, they could hire a bit more of a developmental candidate because they had a leadership development and a really good mentor who was going to be focusing on this person going forward. So, you need to be thoughtful about those variables. What do you need? What is your capacity as a coach and a mentor and a developer of people? And what resources do you have? And, the fewer resources you have, the less time you have to coach and mentor, the closer to perfect your candidate really needs to be. But I mean, one thing you said really importantly, Chris, there are a lot of positions right now even where candidates for those roles are in extremely high demand. And so getting creative about the types of people that you bring in or how you get people into that role, especially mid-manager. I know it's not a quick answer, but thinking about, let's get people when they're earlier in their career and hire them into a lower level position and groom them for those mid-manager positions. It's certainly something worth putting some time and effort into that as well. It's a lot lower risk probability moving someone into a new role when you know that they really fit your culture well and they understand your business. You can teach them some of those things they need to do to be a good manager.
I love that. And I also love the approach for both scenarios when you said it depends, because I find myself saying when attorneys ask me how long it will take to rank for SEO, I say, well, it depends. But the other thing is, I think your first answer, and I was gonna ask this to you, but I've always heard, hire for attitude over aptitude. But I think in your first example, maybe it's the aptitude you're looking for first. Or what would be your thought process on that general saying that you've heard, hire for attitude over aptitude?
And in this case, it will be, in that startup case, it will be a balance, because and I'm sure all of the listeners can come up with one example where they hired someone, and probably multiple examples where they hired someone who was really technically sound and really good at the job, but kind of a jerk, or maybe a real jerk, in whatever way that's being described. And it's detrimental. It's really difficult to get the return on those technical skills when all of the noise of a culture misfit is kind of covering that up and such. So, it will be extremely important for those two hires into that startup to be really technically sound and also be a good culture fit for where they are. And Christina kind of brings up kind of connected to another point, and that is when your firm is at different stages, your definition of a player may be a little bit different. And so where you were going with, would we maybe accept someone who wasn't a perfect culture fit, maybe just an okay culture fit, if they had great skills and had grown businesses before and got them off the ground? Absolutely would consider that, as long as they're not extremely weak culturally to the point where they might be toxic.
I think that's a great point. And so let's go to Topgrading. So, in what ways does Topgrading support, let's say, personal injury law firms who want to hire top talent?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so, Chris, we do that in kind of several different ways in two big buckets. Either one, we can actually help assess candidates for key roles. So, doing really good job scorecards, and then we call them top grading interviews. That's really the magic of the top grading process, is a chronological and in-depth and structured interview that we do with finalist candidates. So, if anyone has ever heard anything about top grading, so often it's connected with a 3 or 4 hour interview. And someone who is either going to maybe come in as a partner or be on a partner track, a little later in their career. So they're on a partner track and maybe very quickly going to get there, expected to get there quickly. It very well may be there may be a great return on investment there, because we're really good insurance against making a hiring mistake. When we do this for clients, our recommendations are about 90% accurate. When we say hire someone, about 90% of the time they turn out to be the A player that everyone was expecting. So even us, experts, we don't get it right 100% of the time, because we're still talking about people, and there are a lot of variables there to get right, but we can really reduce the risk there. And then, especially for positions a little lower in the firm, maybe your first year associates and paralegals and such, we can teach you how to use our methods and use our software. And if you're posting jobs, we have a neat little piece of software that helps screen those applicants down to those who are really qualified for the job. So you can focus on just the highest quality applicants, and we can teach you how to do that. So we have training. We tend to do a little bit of consulting and help get that hiring process right. And then maybe create a couple of job scorecards with you, do some coaching interviews. We have clients, we actually have a bunch, 50 or so case studies up at this point where, with our help at the front often, and for smaller companies, just by getting some training and using the software, they've been able to achieve an 85% hiring success rate. That's sort of our punchline, and our goal really with top grading is to, 85% of the time, get an A player into an open position.
Well, I think it's incredible. So not only on the selection process, but also that 30, 60 day, 30, 60, 90 ramp and like coaching post hire. Is there mentorship and coaching after to get that critical role to where it needs to be?
Yep, and absolutely, yeah. We when we do assessments for those senior people or those key roles, we absolutely do some feedback, and we talk through the job scorecard, and we talk through where any gaps are, because there are often some gaps, some experiential gaps or some things they might need to learn to be a really good fit. So we get them working on the development plan right away. And when we're doing our training, we teach how to use especially that job scorecard to do a bit more effective onboarding, and then using that for the 30 and 60 and 90-day check-ins.
Absolutely. I love all that. And I've got one other question, kind of a little bit separate, a little bit, I wouldn't say negative, but I'm trying to think of a way to position this. But everyone talks about retrospectives and postmortems and all these things to continuously improve. Mm-hmm. What about this is one that we haven't implemented, and I kind of wanted to get your opinion on this, is the employee exit interview when they're leaving. I've always, myself being an owner, and maybe it's because I didn't have the scorecard metrics for everything and I haven't done it as well as obviously the top grading system. But what's your thoughts on those employee exit interviews? Are they kind of a necessity? Or are those retrospectives for something else?
I'd recommend trying to do them, when you lose someone. And I would say especially when the person who is leaving is an A player and you're really disappointed that they're leaving. Talk with them and figure out why. And, it might be a very good reason, like it's a better opportunity, or, my spouse is moving and I need to go with her. And it could also be like, what, man, I thought I was going to have some advancement opportunities. I've been doing the same thing for 5 years and, I've been bored for 2. So especially when your A players leave. And the thing is, you have a higher probability of getting some good data. When your non-A players leave, you're never quite sure what mindset they're in, whether they're, they might just be looking to kind of stick it to you, or, looking at it through a little bit different lens than what might be accurate.
That's great advice there. So Chris, as we're finishing up here, we got a 3 for 3 quick fire round, just 3 questions in 3 minutes here. So the first question, what is your top search engine optimization tip? Total curveball.
Oh, Chris, unfortunately, you're talking to the wrong guy. I know we're doing it. I have people for that.
That's a good answer.
We do have a team. I know what's going on. And I apologize. I can't even answer the question. I kind of know what SEO is. But as far as tips, I'm the wrong guy to ask.
Well, I think your answer is great. Hire the right people, delegate and elevate. Okay, so next one, you'll like this one. So which entrepreneur do you admire the most?
Which entrepreneur? There are so many. I mean,
You give me a few.
I know. I mean, I'm going to give you a guy who I admire for a couple reasons, because he's resilient. And because he also knew how to put a team together. I mean, we never worked with Apple, but the way Steve Jobs developed products was directly in line with our philosophy. And we actually use a quote. I use a quote in presentations. And you'd think I'd remember exactly what the quote is, but I'll paraphrase it if I'm not hitting it exactly. And it's something to the effect of, a small team of A players will run circles around a big team of B and C's. And we find it, we preach that to our clients. And yeah, another reason I admire Steve Jobs, I'm using a Mac, I have an iPhone. I know that a lot of people think they're not, I love it. They work well. You turn them on and just go. So, he's absolutely one. And, the resilience where he got fired as CEO, went off and did some other neat things and then came back and revitalized Apple. Inspirational story. So apologize. I know it's every minute, but go on a little bit.
I love it. Excellent answer. So final question here. What's the next thing on your bucket list?
Next thing on the bucket list, not that original, but I am really eager to get out to the mountains and ski this winter, and just crossing fingers that we're going to be able to do it. So I missed it last year. Everything got shut down a little bit too quickly, and so I'm eager to get some fresh mountain air.
Absolutely. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.